So you notice that many of the hot girls you see in Latin America and Miami are actually from Argentina, and you've decided you're ready to take a really long flight to go and try to meet some of them. But will you be able to do it without knowing any Spanish? Let's look into it. I've been coaching busy entrepreneurs and travelers how to chat up beautiful girls on the streets, in coffee shops, shopping malls, etc. for more than 5 years now. And I've spent more than 6 months in Argentina. I've chatted to around 100 to 150 girls here on the streets. And after coaching 2 students to do the same, I've listened to around 150 conversations they've done. So I have enough of a sample size to not only know what the English level on the streets are, but to see how it has changed over the years, and that's something that really surprised me. We're not gonna do any fancy graphics or interesting vlogs, just me sitting in front of my camera and giving you the facts. So we'll cover 3 topics. Number 1, how open are the girls in Buenos Aires to the idea of being chatted up on a street? Second, how big of a shiny thing are you here just because you're a foreigner? And number 3, what's the actual English level of girls in Buenos Aires? And let's start with how open are girls in Buenos Aires to being chatted up on the street. There are places in Latin America where girls are very open to someone, well, especially a foreigner, stopping them on the street to chat them up. But I would say in Buenos Aires, they are no more impressed by that than they would be in a large city in the USA or in Europe. If you expect them to be super open, you might leave disappointed. But if you're already pretty good at chatting up girls on the street and know what you're doing, they are fairly easy to start a conversation with, they're pretty responsive, and things in general are pretty much straightforward. One thing to note is they are very flaky. Most phone numbers you get will not respond, but don't get discouraged by it. Every place you go to today game will have its bottleneck, and this is Argentina's. Are you a shiny thing just because you're a foreigner? Lots of guys are going to Colombia and a few places in Mexico just because they know girls are very open to meeting foreigners there. That's why Medellin is so overrun with guys from the USA. Looking at the results I was getting and that my students were getting, I would say in Buenos Aires, you are not a shiny thing just because you're a foreigner. Yes, it is interesting and cool to go out with a foreigner, but Buenos Aires has been a tourism and expat hub for decades now. And the places where you're gonna be staying are full with foreigners. And we both know that you're watching this to understand how is it to chat up girls in Buenos Aires as a foreigner. Well, what makes you think that a fairly large percentage of the foreigners already living in Buenos Aires aren't hitting on girls online, in clubs, and even on the streets? So being a foreigner doesn't really give you an edge here. But this is very different if you speak Spanish. The guys who only speak English, the guys who don't speak Spanish, when they're hitting on a girl and a girl doesn't speak any English, they can't have a conversation with her. So you could say that girls that speak English have been hit on by foreigners a bunch of times, probably have been out on a date with a foreigner, maybe, but all the girls that don't speak any English, well, they're not having these conversations with guys who only speak Spanish. And, well, I don't think there are that many guys who speak fluent Spanish and are chatting up girls in Buenos Aires, especially on the streets. So if that's your case, if you speak Spanish and you can chat up girls on the street, then yes, you're getting much more of a shiny factor than the other guys. And finally, what percentage of girls speak English? When I was coaching my last student in Buenos Aires, I kept track of English level of all the girls we approached, and I was surprised to see how much English level has improved in Buenos Aires. When I first came to Buenos Aires 2 years ago, I would say that around 20% of girls on the street could have like a basic conversation in English. Whereas now, 2 years later, looking at the results we were getting with my last student, half of the girls were able to have at least a basic conversation in English. 50%, that's a lot. There were also a few girls who could understand English but couldn't speak it. And if you have some basic Spanish, that's actually very doable because you can speak in English, she can speak in Spanish. Very doable, very easy. But just to clarify, we did most of our coaching sessions in the Palermo neighborhood. We did one session in San Telmo and the English level there was much lower. So if you want to chat up girls in English, stick to day gaming in Palermo. If you're thinking about coming to Buenos Aires, then I've done several videos and a few podcast episodes about Buenos Aires before. I will link the playlist in the description of this video. And if you also want to learn to chat up the hottest girls you see on the streets, in the shopping malls and cafes, then head over to my website and get all the best resources I've created over more than 5 years of coaching doing this.